I never worried about that.
We're going to call the meeting of the Finance Committee.
Hang on for a second, record. I think we got, oh, boy.
We're just making sure everything works.
It does.
Past presentations.
So do we have to wait for that now?
It's going to make, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, a noise until it stops, but that's it.
You think we're on?
We're on.
now?
Mhm.
All right, we're calling the meeting of the Finance Committee to order on July 19th, 2017. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Mark Cookson. Present. Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire. Absent. Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present. Alderman Ben Clemens is absent. And Alderman June Karen is absent. Also absent
Excuse
is
me?
Alderman,
Excuse me, I'm here.
oh, yeah, here, excuse me. I mean, also absent is Alderman Ken Siegel. Okay, also in attendance is Dan Coogan, Purchasing Manager, Noel Osborne, Plant Operations for Natural Wastewater, and John Griffin, CFO. And also Steve Bolton, Corporate Counsel.
First item is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the board or the committee? I don't see any. Communications.
From Dan Coogan, Purchasing Manager, purchase and installation of skateboard park fence, value at $25,918. Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to accept and place on file and contingent upon the Board of Public Works approval, award the contract to Gate City Fence in the amount of $25,918. Funds are available in Department 177, Parks and Recreation, Trust Fund 54, Construction.
Any discussion or questions? Alderman Cookson.
Thank you. I believe that I read, Mr. Kukin, that there were 8 invitations that were sent out to bid on this.
That's correct.
And the 8 that were sent out, were they regionally close?
Yeah, they were nearby, for the, in general. I don't
Greater
know.
Nashua area?
Yeah,
And we received a single bid back?
we did.
And this is the only bid that we have to qualify and react to this evening
It is.
for $25,918.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Further communication from Mr. Dan Coogan, Purchasing Manager, purchase of various chemicals of wastewater treatment facility, a value of $310,000. Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to accept, place on file, and authorize the purchase from Paladine in the amount of $300,000 and a purchase from BASF Corporation in the amount of $10,000. Source of the funding is in Department 169, wastewater.
Now, Ms. Osborne is here, especially for the 2 tabled items, but since this is the wastewater treatment facility, why don't you come up now? I think everybody knows Noel Osborne, plant operations supervisor from the wastewater treatment plant. Are there any questions or any discussion concerning this motion? Alderman Cookson.
Thank you. Just a general question. I understand that at the last finance meeting, we approved a similar purchase for various chemicals for the wastewater treatment facility in the amount of $195,000. And tonight, we're looking at another purchase for $310,000. Why weren't the 2 brought in at the same time for nearly $500,000?
This polymer purchase, the chemicals are different. So the previous month's ferric and hypochlorite, and all of that is different from this one. We don't always stick everything together because we don't like to overwhelm you guys. We want to give you guys all the appropriate information. So polymer is very, very different than the chemicals we use to treat and disinfect the wastewater.
But they could have been presented at the same time. There's nothing that prevented that.
Sure. Yep.
And you knew about this purchase when?
It's an annual purchase. It was approved at the May BPW, so it actually got overlooked in all of the finance meetings prior to this. And as we were establishing the purchase orders, we realized in error that it hadn't been brought to the finance committee yet. So that's why it's taken this long to get here.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion passes. Unfinished business, we have none. New business,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have R 17114, approving a third amendment to site lease agreement with New Singular Wireless relative to a cellular antenna site at Mines Falls Park. Mr. Mayor, make a motion to recommend passage.
you've heard the motion. Now, we have here, thank you, Attorney Bolton, for taking a night out to answer any questions, but any questions regarding this, this lease? Do you, you want to give an overview?
I can. Back, 2.5 years ago, the city entered into an agreement with Verizon Wireless to build a new tower, cellular tower in the, near the existing one at Mines Falls Park, with the idea that it would increase capacity. It's about the same height, but it's stronger and can hold more. And the idea is to migrate all of the wireless service companies onto the new tower. And when that is done, the old tower will be removed and we'll have a one tower situation. This is another step in that process. This is essentially AT&T agreeing to a new lease, an amended lease, if you will, which changes the location of their equipment from the old tower to the new tower.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments on the resolution? Alderman Cookson.
Will this be the final change to the leases to make sure that all the original carriers on the first pole will be moved to the second pole?
There is one more. So I expect you will be seeing that sometime in the months to come.
And I believe, do we not have an ordinance on the books that indicates that we cannot have a cell tower built within 1 mile of an existing cell tower?
I believe that's true, and
How does that apply to this particular situation?
the situation was approved by this board and by the planning board before I occupied this position. I have been working for the last year and 4 months to accomplish what was intended. But if they don't want to sign a new agreement, I can't force them. And we've brought some pressure to bear on AT&T to get this far. But why the situation was allowed to develop so that we would have 2 towers in very close proximity and have this long process of moving carriers from one tower to the other, I don't have enough information to be able to answer that question.
Who's the final carrier?
It's a small one. The name escapes me at the moment.
But you can provide that to us.
Oh, I can,
Thank
yes.
you. And even though we've approved it and we've built 2 towers within feet of one another,
Well, we haven't.
well,
But
two towers have
towers
been,
exist
two towers
within
have been
close
built
proximity.
within feet of one another. How does our law apply to that situation, which says we will not have another cell tower built within 1 mile of an existing?
The city has managed to violate its own ordinance.
And what is the consequence of violating its own ordinance?
We're not going to take ourselves to court over it.
So there is no violation, or
Well,
there is no
there's little
consequence.
consequence.
So there is the possibility, if this other carrier decides to not move forward, we could exist with 2 cell towers as they currently are built right now in Mines Fall Park.
When their lease expires, the remaining carrier, when its lease expires, the situation will resolve itself at that time, hoping it resolves itself prior to then.
And who is responsible for the removal of the tower once that, if we're presented that situation, whose responsibility is it for the removal of that tower?
Verizon Wireless.
Okay. And do we know when that cellular, or this, the cellular carrier, when that lease expires?
I know I don't have well, I guess you'd say it's not in my head, but it's on paper and I can
Do you know
find
which,
that for
do you
you.
know which year?
It's within the next 3 years.
All right. So I would like to request, Mayor Donchis, the name of the carrier and the expiration of the carrier's lease on that cellular pole. Thank you.
Can you?
I'll
Mr.
provide
Bo-
that.
Yes, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments on the motion or the resolution? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes, and the resolution is recommended for final passage. New business ordinances, we have none. We have 2 communications that were tabled in committee, and we have invited Ms. Osborne in to cover the details. The first is from Dan Kuchen and Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, the first one is from Mr. Dan Coogan, Purchasing Manager. Siphon covers change order number 2, value of $16,618. Mr. Mayor, I'd like a motion to take from the table the communication regarding the change order number 2 to the contract for the installation of siphon covers.
Motion is to take this communication from the table. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we have before us the communication described by Alderman O'Brien. Is there a motion to recommend final approval?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to accept and place on file and authorize the change order number 2 to the contract with William P. Davis Excavation, LLC, in the amount of $16,618. Source of the funding is the Department 169 wastewater.
Now, Ms. Osborne, I believe the main question, we will open it to questions in a moment. I think the one question that came up was, is there any way to pursue the original designer for liability? Maybe Mr. Bolden is here to address that as well. In other words, there's some change being required here. And is there any possibility of pursuing the previous provider with, in terms of liability?
So I believe that was brought to the legal department. However, what I'm here to speak about is whether or not we can wait for such litigation.
Well, I do have an answer on the litigation question, which is that this was put in 10 years ago, and it's too long, too far back to pursue it, and the cost of pursuing it would exceed the contract price, really. But especially the 10 years, it's just beyond the statute of limitations, really. Anyway, so can you?
Pardon me, Mayor. May I?
Yeah, of course.
My understanding was that it was completed by Methuen Construction in 2009, which would have been 8 years ago.
8 years ago then.
So doesn't change the course of the conversation, though, regardless, 8 years, 10 years, it still exceeds a statute of limitation.
Correct.
Do we know who signed off on the vortex from a city perspective on the original construction?
We didn't really look into that, but it would have been somebody previous that was running the plant. Who was running the plant in 2009, do you know?
Mario Leclerc.
Mario Leclerc, who's of course gone.
So Mr. Leclerc signed, we're speculating that Mr. Leclerc signed off on this when it was built and back in 2009.
I am speculating because I'm just assuming that because he was the superintendent of the plant at that time, that he must have reviewed this.
Certainly. So with regard to the current plan, we know that it needs to happen, right?
Absolutely.
It has to be centered, the cover has to be centered over the vortex.
Yes, sir.
And so we've got a change order for $16,000, and we've got somebody to come in and do that for us now. And what's the timing on that, and how urgent of an issue is it?
It is a very urgent issue. What happens with that vortex structure is it takes flow from one interceptor and it puts it into another interceptor, and it takes away the energy. It dissipates the energy. The vortex structure itself is designed to take 22 million gallons per day. With the amount of debris in the bottom of that structure, we were facing sanitary sewer overflows every time it rained. We were not getting the volume through there that we needed to. We were able to come up with a short-term solution to address the sanitary sewer overflows, and the street department did do a relief sewer install. Neither of those are good long-term solutions. We need to get the vortex structure cleaned, and in order to do that, we need that larger hatch, and that's a sooner versus later kind of a scenario.
Very good, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. Next, we have a tabled item again from Mr. Kuchen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, from Dan Coogan, Purchasing Man, the pump station upgrades, design services, final design, a value of $461, $569. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to take from the table the communication regarding the pump station upgrades, design services.
Motion is to take this item from the table. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the item?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to accept and place on file and award the contract to Woodward and Curran in the amount of $461,569. Funds are available in Department 169 wastewater.
Thank you. And before we open it to questions, Ms. Osborne, could you just explain what this contract will accomplish?
So this contract, Woodard and Curran has already done a preliminary study on the pump station upgrade, and they've done a 30% design. This contract takes us to the 100% design. This is the final design contract, and it also takes us to contract the bidding and the awarding construction phase services. So this is the final piece to the puzzle to get us to where we need for those pump station upgrades, at least the design part.
Questions, discussion? Alderman Karen.
Yes, thank you. Can you tell me how long it will take you to get this work done on those 14 pump stations?
In
Once you get a
the
final?
in the final page of the draft contract,
Oh, I didn't see
which
it.
I believe there is an updated one that Mr. Kuchen has.
Yeah, I actually have copies of, there were 2 errors in the contract that was previously posted, and I have copies for anybody that would like them. Those 2 errors have been corrected. If you want to see those.
Well, why don't you pass them out to the committee members? At least the ones who are here. Alderman Karen.
I think it's important that we keep our wastewater facility
Thank you.
up to par. Nobody knows more than I do, since it's in my ward, and we've had some good reports on it. And the thing is that if something major happens, it affects everybody, it doesn't affect just a few people. So I know it's a lot of money, but when you're talking 30 to 55 years old, I think it's important that we get our wastewater treatment plant up to snuff. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So if you look at the second page of that handout, you do have the timeline, which includes the construction phase services as estimated to complete in December of 2019.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Cookson.
I had several questions from the last meeting, and I didn't know is somebody prepared to answer those questions? Or do I need to re-ask them?
Why don't you re-ask them just so it's clear what they are?
All right. So let me begin. I'm just reviewing the minutes from the last meeting so that I actually have the verbiage that I used to ask the questions. And the very first question that I asked, and I believe that Mr. Kuchen responded with regard to the termination clause, indicating that the termination clause was stricken from the contract with, is it Kern and Wood?
Woodard and Curran.
Thank you. And that's because the city has its own termination clause. So even though the termination clause isn't visible to us with what we're approving, the city has a termination clause that is applicable and will be applied as necessary.
Correct.
All right, very good. Second question was with regard to the indirect costs. And so we've got, so on page 1 of the sheet that Mr. Kuchen has just provided us, the highlighted section, the rate 2.02, the base 126,728 for an estimated cost of 255,990. Now, I don't have the original contract in front of me. I don't know if that 255,990 is the same number, that they just had an incorrect base.
That's what it is, yes.
It is. So my question was going to be, it was reduced from $168,290 down to $126, but we don't see a change in the price for the total contract of $461,569. So therefore, that base was incorrectly stated, but the estimated cost in the original contract was correct at $255,990.
That's correct.
Thank you. All right. So they are Woodward and Curran. Oh, I completely messed that up, didn't I?
That's okay.
Woodward and Curran is proposing a contract where they project manage the final design, engineering, bid documents, permitting, cost estimating, and bid assistance. Okay. And will they be one of the firms that will bid on the contract?
On the construction phase services, no, I do not believe that that's in their wheelhouse at all. They're just an engineering firm.
Okay. So that was one of the questions that we had asked last time, and the conversation went on, well, it seemed unfair that they are actually part of the project management bid assistance process, and they're actually going to bid on the project itself. And you've just stated that they will not be bidding on the project itself.
Not on the construction.
Very good. Will they be bidding on any other aspects of the project?
No, their main function is the engineer, so they are doing the design. Yes, there's a project manager that's going to help us with the bidding documents and the construction phase services. But at this point, I believe for this project, this will be our final agreement with them. Whether or not there's a change order down the road, I can't speak to, but this will be our final contract with them on this pump station design project.
And they've been part of it for a very long time already, correct?
Since the beginning,
Yes.
2015, I believe. Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I had any other questions. All right. So my last question was, obviously, we're going to be paying them a healthy sum of money to primarily project manage. The two errors that are within this contract don't lend a lot of faith, in my mind, to their ability to find the minute details. Huge project. And, so I don't know who was responsible for the contract. I'm not sure how this got before Finance Committee without anybody seeing it prior to the Finance Committee. I'll pause if Mr. Kuchen would like to respond.
I can interject that I was sent a document on the 5th, the date of our last meeting, that actually had the corrections on them. But I didn't really put two and two together that said, oh, this is different than what I had. When I looked at the contract, I looked it over, I didn't read every page. I said, oh, I already have this document, and that's what was presented. But at the time of the last meeting, we actually did have the corrected numbers. So they were aware, and they had been corrected. Unfortunately, they were presented.
So these 2 pages that you've presented to us this evening were from the document that you received on the 5th of this month?
Correct.
All right. The highlighting you provided, is that correct, Mr. Kuchen?
Yes.
Can I ask a question with regard to the estimated project schedule, the final figure on the last page, on page 5? So final design, they have between July 2017 through November of 2017, but they don't necessarily specify the 60%, the 90% review meetings, the NHDES permit applications, and the 100% bid documents complete.
Correct.
So will we know in more detail when those activities are going to take place within these 5 months?
When we have the final contract ready to go, we will sit down, we'll have a meeting, a project meeting, and we usually set the deadlines at that point. So we'll have a better idea when we have the final approvals for this.
And same thing for bidding, is that correct?
Yes.
Or is bidding a reaction to the previous final design work and the regulatory review?
Yeah, it has to go through DES for approvals and everything, and sometimes that's time consuming, so it's kind of a looser schedule. When it gets to the bidding part, we need to have it approved by DES before we can put it out to bid. So we'll have, like I said, better ideas once we get the final project moving along.
And the final construction is going to take 18 months, thereabouts?
Thereabouts.
Are there opportunities for efficiency, or can we pull this in any?
We have pulled it in. The schedule itself, a lot of the pump stations in the 30% design are cookie cutter stations. You know, you buy the structure and it doesn't have to be constructed there. So there's just site work and things to happen on site. But you still have to look at, you know, lead times on pumps and those little buildings and things like that. So this is our best estimate, or the engineer's best estimate for the time frame. Certainly, if we can expedite it at any point, we would.
Is this the city's best estimate, or is this
This comes from Woodard and Curran.
Woodford and Kern? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion passes. We have one resolution which we've held in, thank you, Ms. Osborne, I think, and Mr. Bolden. I think we have completed. I don't see any other items that you may be asked about, so thank you very much for coming in. There's one resolution that's been tabled, but we're awaiting an infrastructure committee recommendation, which I believe they're going to take up sometime in the near future. Record of expenditures.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion that Finance Committee is compiled with the city charter and ordinances pertaining to the record of expenditures for the period of July 1st, 2017 to July 13th, 2017.
Any discussion, questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Public comments, I don't see anyone who wishes to speak. Remarks by aldermen. Are there any members of the committee who would like to address any issues? If not, there is no public session. Alderman Cookson,
Motion to adjourn?
all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:31 PM. Thank you, everyone.